talking about what's known as product rule, where if I have a function f of x, which is a product of two other functions, let's say g of x and k of x, how do I take its derivative? So when we had a sum, we were able to just do a nice, we just take the derivative of each piece and then add them together. For a product, unfortunately, it's not quite so simple. So we're always going to start with a limit definition, okay? And this one's going to get a little bit involved, so be ready. So we're going to have that the limit definition of the derivative is equal to the limit as h goes to 0 of f of x plus h minus f of x divided by h. And now I want to plug in my function. So I'm going to have the limit as h goes to 0 of g of x plus h times k of x plus h minus g of x times k of x, all divided by h. Okay. And now I'm going to just move this a little bit this way because I fear running out of space. So now we're going to say, okay, I'm going to do something a little weird. I'm going to add 0 to this. Okay. And when I say I'm going to add 0, what I really mean is I have the limit as h goes to 0 of g of x plus h times k of x plus h. And here's where I'm adding 0. I'm going to subtract g of x times k of x plus h, and then I'm going to add it back. So I'm going to add g of x times k of x plus h, and I still have the minus g of x, k of x at the end. And this is all divided by h. Okay, so you might say, why did I just do that? That's kind of a weird thing to do. Well, it's going to allow us to factor some stuff nicely, which previously we could not do with just the expression we had up here. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to say, okay, I have the limit as h goes to 0 of, and here I'm going to start grouping some stuff together. So I'm going to say I have g of x plus h minus g of x, and that's all going to be multiplied by k of x plus h. And then I'm going to say plus g of x times, and I'm going to group some other stuff together, k of x plus h minus k of x. And this whole thing is going to be divided by h as usual. Okay, so from here, I'm going to split this up using my limit properties. So I'm going to have the limit as h goes to 0 of, my first thing is going to be g of x plus h minus g of x divided by h. I'm going to multiply that by the limit as h goes to 0 of k of x plus h. And then I'm going to have plus the limit, because I can split this, right? It's just a sum, as h goes to 0 of g of x multiplied by the limit as h goes to 0 of k of x plus h minus k of x divided by h. And now as we look at this, you might recognize a couple things here. So this first limit, right, this is going to be equal to, this limit here is simply the derivative of g. So what I have is I have g prime of x. What's it being multiplied by? Well, if I take the limit as h goes to 0, this is just k of x. So I have g of x times k of x plus, what do I have over here? Well, the limit is h goes to 0 of g of x. There are no h's here, so it's just g of x. And then times, this whole thing is just the derivative of k. So I have times k of x. This is called the product rule. This says that if I have a product of two functions and I want to find the derivative, there should be a prime here. This is the derivative of k, right? That's what I just said. So if I have a product of two functions and I want to find the derivative, what I can do is I take the derivative of the first function, multiply it by the second, then add to it the derivative of the second multiplied by the first. So first times the derivative of the second plus second times the derivative of the first. And that's product rule. So how do we use this? Let's look at a couple examples here just so you can kind of see how we do this. So if I get rid of these, we'll do two examples. Let's say f of x is equal to x squared times sine x. And I want to find f prime of x, find the derivative. I can do this with product rule. So what I'm going to do, and there's a couple ways you can do this, right? If you want to, like at first, if you're kind of getting comfortable with it, if you want to write out, g of x equals x squared, k of x equals sine x, and then say, okay, well, let's take the derivative of each one. G prime of x is equal to 2x. K prime of x is equal to cosine of x, right? And then you just use product rule, and I say, okay, well, I'm going to have g prime of x times k of x plus g of x times k prime of x, right? And then we plug in, and I say, okay, g prime is 2x times k of x is going to be sine x plus g of x is x squared times k prime of x is cosine x, and that would be my answer. Or, you can kind of just go through it and say, okay, if you think of it as first times the root of the second plus second times the root of the first, right? First, x squared times the root of the second, cosine x, plus second, sine x, times the root of the first, 2x. And you can rewrite it a little bit to neaten it up. So you have x squared cosine x plus 2x sine x, right? Just kind of rearrange it. But you get the same thing. So if this is a little bit more comfortable at first, please feel free to do this. But as you go through and you want to do stuff a little bit more quickly, it helps if you can kind of get in the habit of just looking at the function and then writing down the derivative by remembering first times the root of the second plus second times the root of the first. Honestly, when I do product rule, I still say that in my head as I go through the problems. Let's look at one more. Let's say f of x is equal to 4x times cosine of x. Now this one might be a little weird because you say, wait a minute, I have three things being multiplied. I have 4x and cosine of x. But really, you can group these into two different products. Two different functions. So I'm going to call this as one function, and this is going to be the other one. And this is a nice function to choose because I know that I can just pull the constant out, right? So I can even just ignore this, find the derivative of just x cosine x, and then multiply that by 4 at the end as well. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to say first 4x times the derivative of the second, negative sine x, plus second cosine x times the derivative of the first, 4. I'm going to rewrite this to make it nice. So I'm going to have negative 4x sine x plus 4 cosine x. And you can factor this if you want. You can say, oh, well, this is going to be negative 4 times x sine x minus cosine of x if you want. But this part is less important. I believe that you can do algebra at this point in your mathematical career. So the most important thing is just getting the derivative. So I just feel free to leave it like this. You don't have to simplify it unless you need to then use this derivative to go on and do something else. Then you're of course going to want to have it simplified so it's a little bit easier to work with. So that's how you do product rule and find the derivative of a function which is a product of two other functions.